can always be optimistic about property. It's just a matter of when, and we're no longer in that volcanic market that we've experienced over recent years, particularly in the Sydney market. I mean, these are extraordinary times. We've seen house prices double in the last 4 years in Sydney. We've seen queues of buyers basically for every property that was offered for sale. Now, these times had to come to an end. They were driven by low interest rates, falling interest rates, and we've got to ground zero in terms of interest rates, unlikely but not impossibly lower again, and certainly the prospects for higher rates aren't there, so that should give you confidence in the first place that we're not going to have the apple cart turned over by a higher rate regime. But look, it's about expectations, and the point is that without that over demand for property that we've had in recent years, that it's a more balanced market. That's certainly shown by clearance rates. Clearance rates are holding just above 60% in Sydney, which means it's more or less a neutral market. I still say slightly ahead in favour of sellers, but it depends where you're selling and what you're selling. And I think that this is the future. We have to get used to working a little harder for your sales, but the seller days have finished. We will, I don't believe, ever have these types of results we've had in recent years in terms of prices growth and accelerating demand. It's going to be more of a flatter market, a market where you have to work harder for your product. But let's think of the big picture in the Sydney market. Every week there's demand for 1,100 new households in Sydney. That's not changeover buyers, that's new households. That's migrant households and first home buyer households. And at the moment we're falling backwards in terms of supply coming into the market. We've passed the peak boom. People have got to live somewhere, and we won't get the same prices growth that we've had in recent years because we don't have the low interest rate driver to push up prices, and we certainly don't have incomes growth to push up prices as well. But Sydney will remain an undersupplied market. It will remain a key target for migrants. It'll remain a market where everybody wants to be a homeowner. And even though that will remain a struggle, the aspiration for home ownership will continue. Hopefully the negativity in terms of this transition from a boom market into a neutral market will eventually work its way into the media, and will stop. And I think they're getting a little tired now of the doom and gloom predictions for this market. Prices growth, I believe, over the medium to longer term will settle at around 2 to 3% in the Sydney market, and for most housing markets. Without that drive of interest rate rises and falls, markets become more about local factors and personal decisions from buyers and sellers. But the key point is the Sydney market is undersupplied. Too many people, not enough houses, and we're unlikely to ever be able to match demand in this geographically constrained market, which is one of the world's great destinations for tourists, which is seeing permanent accommodation being sucked into tourist accommodation through Airbnb, and is still a favoured destination for Chinese tourists and residents. So you've just got to work a little bit harder. Remember, this business is about, at the end of the day, hard work for the vendor to find a buyer, and the buyer having a bit more of a go of it now compared to recent years. It's now the time of the vendor to start thinking about working a little bit harder to find that seller, and that means expectations. And I think that's the role of the agent, is to look at the expectation of the vendor and to challenge expectations. The negotiation process continues as it always does, but this time it's a lot more of a 50-50 market going forward. But by geez, you'd rather be a homeowner than not in Sydney market, and that's going to be the case for in my opinion forever. So always be confident about that reality, and that reality is substantiated by the data. It's not just an opinion.